Joining us now to discuss, we're joined today by Andrew Harding. He's a senior associate of the National Security Coalitions for the Heritage Foundation. And Dr. Sinan Ciddi is a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Good morning, gents.
Good morning.
Appreciate your joining us. President Trump holding a brief press conference yesterday, answering a reporter over his comments, calling the war complete. Let's watch.
Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared?
Well, I think you could say it both. The beginning, it's the beginning of building a new country, but they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no radar, they have no telecommunications, and they have no leadership. It's all gone.
Andrew, what do you make of the president's remarks?
Well, good morning. I think President Trump is making very clear about how successful Operation Epic Fury has been on such a short timescale. As he mentioned, we've seen the complete decimation of the Iranian ability to maintain its own airspace. We've seen its Navy completely blown out of the water. And we're now seeing the president thinking about his active involvement with the regime and thinking about how the political leadership can come together and how the Iranian people can have the opportunity to control their own destiny in the weeks ahead, as the president may consider what the end of the war may look like here. But furthermore, I do think what the Secretary Hegseth is referring to is still relevant as well, in that the United States will continue its air campaign, and that the goals of this operation have always been to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and preventing Iran from developing a ballistic missile capability that can hit the continental United States. So as long as Iran poses a threat with those regards, I think strikes will continue, and ultimately it'll be up to the president to determine whenever those objectives have been successfully achieved.
Yeah, Iran did not serve its mission well by attacking many of the other nations surrounding Iran. And Sinan, the thing is that everything that Andrew mentioned is spot on concerning this mission. But at the same time, the U.S. has an interest in establishing Gaza, renovating Gaza, restoring Gaza quite differently than anyone else has envisioned. And there's massive investment going on. So the last thing you want is someone like a new leader, or even the old ones, disrupting the peace progress that President Trump is trying to instill in the Middle East. What say you?
Yeah, there's many different moving parts to this sort of equation. I think, because of the war going on right now, what we've seen is essentially all attention focused on combat operations going on inside of Iran right now with Israel and the United States. And obviously, in the case of Gaza, we still have a lot to achieve. And we also know that terrorist elements, proxy networks of Iran, such as Hamas, which operates in Gaza, as well as its other proxy, Hezbollah, operating in Lebanon, which Israel is currently striking, are also entities which have to be degraded and demolished even further. But as you also just correctly alluded, we still have a considerable amount of danger that emanates out of Iran coming forward. We should have to see in the coming days and weeks if this will be continually eliminated. Iran does have a new leader, a supreme leader elected, the son of the former dictator Khamenei. His son, unfortunately, is right now, I would say, quite a dangerous man, because he's had all of his close relatives, including his daughter, eliminated, and he himself has been injured. And I would estimate that he's quite vengeful right now. And the thing to watch out for is just how much Iran will continue to lash out and bombard close U.S. allies and partners in the region, notably in the Gulf, but also further afield. We've seen essentially several attempts to strike NATO country Turkey with ballistic missiles, which have so far been downed by NATO intervention in the Eastern Mediterranean. But there is still a lot to achieve, and there's still a lot of uncertainty that continues.
Well, Sinan, you mentioned the new Ayatollah here, the son of, his name is Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, but it's been more than 24 hours later. There's still no real proof of life, just AI-generated videos, old photos. Iranians themselves are starting to call him the AI Ayatollah. So, Andrew, what's going on here?
Well, I think it would be great to see some type of proof of life to ensure that the new Ayatollah is doing exactly as he and maybe any AI videos may claim he's prepared to do. But I also think and fully agree with Sinan's point here that this is a very dangerous individual in the sense that he's very closely aligned with the IRGC. He's considered to be a very strong, militant-focused background, very an ideologue when it comes to supporting the Iranian regime, and very much interested in having an anti-U.S., anti-Israel foreign policy. So this is an individual, should he be the leader and should he be in a position to lead, someone, as President Trump has made clear, he's not overly happy about or thrilled about. So it'll be interesting to see that if the new Ayatollah here is able to rise to the new challenge here with the country, if he's really going to have any type of success in making Iran into a better place that could put into a diplomatic position to work with the president. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I expect him to continue to support combat operations, to support Iran in fighting back, but also President Trump is going to support the United States continuing strikes, especially with this Ayatollah taking these hardline stances against the U.S. The conflict, therefore, should only likely continue in the coming weeks.
So true. And President Trump was asked whether there is still a path to help the Iranian people as pressure builds on Tehran.
Will I help them? I'd like to, if they can behave. But they've been very menacing. You know, they're great people. They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And right now they're in a system that only allows failure. And I don't want that. And I want a system that's not going to be attacking us.
Sinan, does that sound like the U.S. is now thinking beyond military strikes and actually installing a new leadership, creating a path forward for democracy in Iran?
I would say TBD on that. What we'll have to see is essentially what the status of the regime is in terms of how far and effectively it has been degraded. Because as I think both of us are trying to point out, that we have essentially what is a wounded beast in the region. It has taken a considerable amount of pounding from the United States and Israel in military terms, and it could still face quite a punishing sort of sortie of strikes that continue. The question is, if this new leader is alive and well, below him, we still have the continuity of government. We still have the IRGC that's very much in control, even if communications have been degraded and its military forces thwarted to some extent. What we still have is a defiant Iran. What I'm interested in seeing is if major combat operations are paused, ceased, or come to an end, to what extent and to what degree is the remnants of the Iranian government willing to sit down and make some very hard choices and decisions along the lines of, first, are they willing to give up their nuclear stockpiles and program, their ballistic missile program, and willing to essentially terminate their support of proxy networks in the Middle East? And if not, then that should be a considerable red line for us in terms of achievements, because we have to essentially ensure that this wounded beast is not capable of resurging, regrouping, and in a position to strike the United States and its allies in the future.
Exactly, because then all of this would be for naught. But there's, new questions this morning after President Trump was pressed on an airstrike in Iran that killed nearly 175 students.
Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I haven't seen it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic, it's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
Andrew, if this investigation ends up raising more doubts about how that strike happened, what does that mean for the United States and the broader mission going forward?
Well, I think it's important to have this type of investigation to get to the bottom of it. I know Secretary Hegseth is very interested in getting to that result. And importantly, in the event that this did happen, obviously it would be extraordinarily tragic, but also important to note that the United States would never intentionally target a school or civilian population. This is in stark contrast to what we're seeing Iran doing just within the past week and a half here with Operation Epic Fury, where their willingness to target civilian population centers, hotels, tourist sites, and infrastructure that is critical to water, providing water for countries in the Middle East, as well as oil infrastructure that's key to not only local economies, but the global economy. So I think it's certainly important to get this investigation out, moving through and get to the truth. But let's also not forget that Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terror, should not be in the position to say the United States is not trying to do the right thing here.
You know, Sinan, this actually causes me to recall several American universities who have campuses in various parts of the Middle East. And let's not forget, there are many Americans who are still there. Do you think Iran, with its few missiles that remain, will actually try to retaliate? Because if that happens, then I can see President Trump moving forward to just completely level everything, except for the Iranian people.
Well, I think you're right in that. Oh, sorry.
That's for Sinan.
No, it's okay. Thank you. I think it's an interesting question. I mean, what we have seen with Iran is they're playing a game of asymmetry. Look, the U.S. military and the United States has, rules of war, rules of engagement, just war concepts. Our military elite are well versed and well trained in ethics, legality, and could be held fully accountable before law for the actions that they take in combat. Whereas the Iranians, the Iranian military or the IRGC itself has arguably no similar standards, which is why we are seeing them striking civilian targets. And we've also seen their proxy networks in the form of Hamas and Hezbollah striking civilian targets without a second thought, whether it be schools or positioning civilians up on top of roofs as using them as shields to prevent Hamas strongholds being hit in Gaza. In the case of Iran right now and all the civilian strikes that we're seeing in the Gulf states, most sort of notably I've seen in places like Dubai, Iran doesn't care. What they're trying to do is inflict maximum pain on Gulf states to disrupt their economy, their way of life, simply because as a ploy to essentially pressure these countries to implore the United States to back off combat operations. And so, you're not looking at a country that's well-versed in ethics and legality and rules of war. What they are interested in is essentially any means to sort of upset and lash out at any country. And this is not something that they've hidden. They've told us that they were going to do this in the past, that they've essentially spent 47 years as the Islamic Republic preparing for a day like this to punish what they see as all their enemies.
Yeah, we continue to pray for all Americans, including students as well as faculty members who are still somewhere in the Middle East who want to return home safely. Thank you so much, Andrew and Dr. Ciddi.